If we might come back to order, the chairman is detained on the floor, and I apologize, Ms. Secretary, for it's a real inconvenience when they expect you to vote around here from time to time, and we apologize and thank you for your patience and also your appearance here this morning. So please, the floor is yours.
Thank you. To continue, emotions in Serbia run high. Emotions in Serbia run high over Kosovo. We recognize Serbia's opposition to Kosovo's independence, and for that reason have reached out to Serbia. This makes the February 21st mob attack on our embassy and other embassies in Belgrade all the more disgraceful. We hold Serbian authorities accountable for the safety of our diplomats and facilities. We cannot overlook such acts of violence, but barring future such problems, our diplomatic efforts must be focused on helping Serbia find a future within the European and transatlantic family. The choice is Serbia's to make. Serbia could have a great future as part of an undivided Europe, and Serbia has a legitimate interest in the welfare of Kosovo's Serb community, and this is provided for under the Ahtisaari Plan. Hopefully, Serbia's leaders will resist, as they must, the lure of nationalist demagoguery and self-isolation. There cannot be long-term stability in the Balkans without progress in Bosnia and Herzegovina. The reform process there has lost momentum, and we've witnessed an increase in divisive nationalist rhetoric. Political leaders there need to show courage to find a way forward together. Without a resumption of progress, Bosnia and Herzegovina risks regressing along national lines. Some leaders of the Bosnian entity known as Republika Srpska have claimed parallels between Kosovo and themselves and are playing with the fires of secession. They need to stop rhetoric that can take on a dangerous life of its own. They must not undermine the Dayton Constitution that is in fact the foundation for the existence of the Republika Srpska. Bosnian nationalist calls for the abolition of Republika Srpska are also unacceptable and have contributed to radicalizations. Reforms may upgrade but cannot supplant Dayton, which stopped the fighting in Bosnia years ago. On an encouraging note, the three members of the Adriatic Charter, Albania, Croatia, and Macedonia, are on a positive trajectory. All are now contributing to international security and to NATO operations. All three have troops on the ground in Afghanistan. The United States wants to see these countries join NATO, and NATO is poised to make decisions in Bucharest early next month. We hope that the issue between Macedonia and Greece over the name of Macedonia can be resolved in a constructive way. The United States is encouraging both parties to work with UN negotiator Matt Nimitz to use the time remaining to come to a solution. The United States will do what it can to help this process. I've given an overview of this administration's approach to the Balkans. It's a key region for us and our European allies. We've made progress helping this region move from war to peace, from disintegration to sustainable development, and toward a European and Euro-Atlantic future. And I thank you for the opportunity to share thoughts with you, and I'm now happy to answer all questions.
I might have a comment or two. I'm not sure I have any questions. I'm sorry I wasn't here for the initial part of the hearing, but we were on the floor debating what happened last night and probably will be debating the rest of the day. I've watched over the 25 years I've been on the Foreign Affairs Committee, the United States and the United Nations and other organizations to try to impose our will from the outside on conflicts within a certain area between 2 or 3 countries. And I just feel kind of bad that the United States is forcing Serbia to accept the independence of Kosovo while Kosovo has always been a part of Greater Serbia. I've talked to Serbian leaders, and they have told me that they have no problem with Kosovo having an independent government within the confines of the Greater Serbian area. And it concerns me that we're forcing the independence of Kosovo on the Serbians. There's no question Milosevic did some horrible things and should have been held accountable, and I think that's one of the reasons why the problem exists today. Nevertheless, my concern is that what we're insisting on and what we have insisted on, along with NATO and the UN, is going to lead to further problems down the road. I don't like to see conflict. I don't like to see war. But you're not going to end it, in my opinion, long term. You might for a short term, but you're not going to end it long term unless you get the warring parties to sit down and come to some kind of an agreement. We've been trying externally in the Middle East to solve the Palestinian issue and the issue between Hezbollah, Hamas, and Israel. And we've been doing it for as far back as I can remember, and we have done it without success. We've worked and worked and worked, and we haven't reached much of a conclusion. The killing goes on, it abates for a while, but it goes on and on and on. Until they're willing to sit down and realize the carnage has to stop, you're not going to stop it. You can't do it externally, even though the United States, big brother around the world, is trying to get that job done, and with the help in some cases with the United Nations and NATO. But here in this area, I'm very concerned, and you can make a comment if you want to, Mr. Secretary. I'm very concerned that the unilateral action that's been taking place, making Kosovo independent, may not in the short term cause military conflict, but I think in the long term it's going to continue to be a boil that will end up with more heartache and heartbreak and conflict down the road. And so I think what I'm saying is like kind of blowing into a hurricane. I'm not sure what I'm saying is going to make much of a difference, but it does concern me. I think the die has been cast. But when you talk to the people in Serbia, the leaders, I've talked to the president all the way on down, they say that they had no problem with Kosovo governing themselves within the confines of a Greater Serbia, as they have always been. But when they become an independent nation and you are severing part of the sovereignty of Serbia, you're creating a lot of hostility that I think is going to be a problem down the road. The other thing is there has been some severe problems with churches being burned in Kosovo, people being driven out of their homes in Kosovo. Tens of thousands have been removed from the places that they've lived and the churches that they've attended for a long, long time. This is an issue that has to be addressed if you go ahead, and I presume we will, with the independent Kosovo. And so if the United Nations and NATO and the U.S. Have made this commitment to an independent Kosovo, they'd better darn well make sure the people that are living there that are Serbs and people who have different religious views aren't run out of the country, aren't tortured, hurt, or destroyed, as it has been in the last few months. And with that, I think you know where I stand. I yield back.
You care to respond, Mr. Secretary?
If I could respond. Congressman, you are right that the breakup of Yugoslavia was sad. I think you used that word. And indeed it was. And the way it broke up was terrible. But it's gone, and Kosovo's independence is part of the breakup of Yugoslavia. Croatia, Slovenia, Bosnia, Montenegro, Macedonia are now all independent countries, as is Serbia.
May I ask a question, since I still have the time? Was Kosovo part of Greater Serbia before?
Kosovo became part of Greater Serbia in 1912, and then it Serbia and Kosovo became part of the new Kingdom of Yugoslavia.
I understand, but they
and
were part of Greater
Yugoslavia
Serbia.
fell.
And
For a-
one other question. Serbia in World War II, all the conflicts that have taken place, Serbia has always been an ally of the United States, has it not?
Serbia was an ally in both world wars. That's true.
Okay, thank you.
That is true. It is also true that after the massive ethnic cleansing that the Milosevic dictatorship perpetrated against the Kosovo Albanians, after the massive violence, the years of repression, there was no way, in our judgment, that Kosovo would ever be ruled from Belgrade again. And I say this, and I convey this judgment with sadness, because the breakup of Yugoslavia was violent and terrible and quite possibly unnecessary. But it is a fact, and it was in this context that we had to make difficult choices. Congressman, you also mentioned the violence against Serbs in your, and this is a reference mainly to riots that occurred 4 years ago. These were terrible things, and they need to be addressed. Since Kosovo's independence, I'm happy to report that there has been, so far, no violence and no incidents directed against the Serb communities in Kosovo, no reports of any, and that the violence perpetrated has been perpetrated by Serbs. Now, I can't say that this situation will remain as it is, but so far, the situation, and I was in Kosovo last Friday, is that. The Ahtisaari Plan, which provides for Kosovo's supervised independence, consists of extensive rights and provisions to enforce those rights for the Serb population of Kosovo. And it is the intention and commitment of the international community, the United States, the European Union, to see those rights are enforced. The Kosovo government has accepted the Ahtisaari Plan and has already passed laws to implement it, and it is our intention to see that it is implemented in practice, not just in theory. And I can report to you that the Kosovo leaders with whom I met conveyed to me their intention to see that Ahtisaari's provisions, including the rights and privileges for the Serb community in Kosovo, are respected. And I will continue to work with this committee to report to you about how these are implemented in practice, as well as work to see that they are on the ground.
Let me just make one more comment, Mr. Chairman. I have been told, and I presume it's accurate, that there have been additional churches burned, and that there have been additional Serbs driven from their homes and to find refuge elsewhere. You're saying that this hasn't happened in the last 4 years?
No, I'm not saying that. I'm saying it has, that since independence, I have no reports of violence against Serbs. And when I met with the two Serbian ministers in the new Kosovo government, they did not report to me such incidents. There have been problems, and it is one of KFOR's responsibilities to protect the Serb communities. I also said that the violence since independence has been, the violence that has existed, which has been very limited, has been perpetrated by radicals in the Serbian community.
Unanimous consent. The gentleman have an additional minute.
Let me just say, I've had religious leaders from Kosovo come to see me, members of the Orthodox Church, all the way up to the head of the Orthodox Church. And he has told me, and I don't believe the gentleman's lying, he's a pretty religious leader and a religious man. He has told me that there has been continued violence against their churches, and there's been continued violence against people in many of those areas that have been driven from their homes. Now, if everything's hunky-dory over there, then I don't know why they're coming to my office and telling me that. And I hope what you're saying is going to be true. I hope that the violence does stop. But these hatreds go back a long time, and I think it's going to be very difficult for the United States, NATO, the UN, to be there forever to continue to make sure that peace reigns. Until those two governments, until those two peoples are willing to sit down with each other and work things out, I don't think you're ever going to solve this problem.
I entirely agree that we have a responsibility to protect the rights of the Serbian community, and we intend to try to do so.
The time of the gentleman has expired. I'll yield myself 5 minutes for questions. As I mentioned in my opening comments, when I was in Kosovo, one could not help but come away with a sense of the dismal economic situation, I guess. Very high unemployment, lack of major work on infrastructure, these kinds of things. I'd like you to just speak to the economic development prospects for Kosovo. What steps can Kosovo take to reduce its significant unemployment to stimulate economic growth? When will it be eligible to apply for IMF and World Bank funding? What assistance will the U.S. pledge at the International Donors Conference this summer?
Kosovo's future, as your question rightly suggests, will depend on its economic viability so that people, frankly, have more to do than worry about causes of the past. If people have jobs and prospects, they'll start thinking more about the future. We have long regarded Kosovo's economic development as critical to the security in Kosovo. We are planning with the European Union and the support of the World Bank a major donors conference in June. One of my messages to the Kosovar leadership last week was that they should focus on the economy, and they heartily agreed. Without a resolution of Kosovo's status, without its independence, they would have been ineligible to join the World Bank and the IMF. Now the way is open for them to do so. In terms of economic development, there are really three tracks that have to work together. One is investment from below, as it were. Kosovar and Albanian communities in Europe and the United States will send money and will invest in the country, and this is already happening. Secondly, with a resolution of status, there may be some major investment in Kosovo, investment from the top. Kosovo has some serious coal and other mineral reserves. And the third will be international support. The Congress has already appropriated about $350, close to $400 million of assistance funds for Kosovo. The administration may ask for more for future budgets. The Europeans have pledged money. So between our support for a period of time and investment, we hope to see the Kosovo economy start to get on its feet.
Thank you. I'd like to turn to the broader issue of expanded NATO membership. The U.S. position on membership invitations to Albania, Croatia, and Macedonia at the summit next month in Bucharest. Are the allies are our allies in NATO likely to support invitations to those countries? What happened at the March 6th meeting of the NATO foreign ministers in terms of views on these candidacies? And then, if you could briefly describe the weaknesses in each of these countries, addressing challenges, corruption, weak judicial systems, immature parliaments, as opposed to our very mature one.
I had the honor of accompanying Secretary Rice to the NATO foreign ministers meeting last week, and I can report to you that there is a developing consensus in favor of invitations to all three countries. There is one major issue, which I mentioned in my testimony, which is the issue of Macedonia's name, and we have encouraged Macedonia to work with Greece to resolve this. NATO heads of state and government will make their decision.
Let me just end there. Are the words "work with Greece" to resolve this sort of a boilerplate statement we make, or is there any reason in the world to believe that the two can resolve this?
It's not a boilerplate statement. On Friday night, I was in Skopje and met with the Macedonian leadership and encouraged them to work with Greece and to find a way forward. And of course, I am in contact with our Greek allies and friends about this. We are doing what we can, and to support Ambassador Matt Nimitz, the UN negotiator on the name issue. This is not a pro forma process. This is a real one, and I think both governments would like to find a solution. It's a hard issue for them. It's not a trivial issue. These issues touch on deep emotions in both countries, but we're doing what we can to encourage a solution. Sir, you mentioned the weaknesses of all three countries, and then you mentioned the salient ones. All three face the same challenges that other post-communist countries have faced in the early stages of their development. That is, relatively weak institutions of modern governance, relatively immature political systems, but all three have made very rapid and impressive progress. All three have moved very far. Albania has moved a tremendous distance over the past 10 years, as has Macedonia. Croatia was always more developed, frankly more wealthy than the other two, but it has also moved a long way. They have made considerable progress. They have more to do, but frankly, we have learned a lot about NATO enlargement, and we know that countries, when they come into the alliance, don't stop their reforms, they continue them.
Thank you very much. My time has expired. I recognize the ranking member, Ms. Ross-Layton.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chairman. Just one question to follow up on the name issue. As we know, Greece has been an important NATO ally, deployed almost 2,000 troops last year combined in Kosovo and Afghanistan. What U.S. efforts can we undertake to help Greece deal with this 15-year impasse over one of its neighbors to the north, that in its official name, the former Yugoslav Republic of Macedonia. Greece strongly believes that to recognize its neighbor as the Republic of Macedonia, as the U.S. did a few years ago, would eventually open the door to claims in that territory in northern Greece, which is also referred to as Macedonia in Greece. What more can we do to help resolve this thorny situation?
It was very much with that in mind that I went to Skopje Friday night and urged the Macedonian leaders to do what they could to find some mutually acceptable way forward. And of course, I've been in touch, as I said, with my Greek friends about this. Greece is a good NATO ally. We have good relations with both countries, and we very much want to see a resolution. The issues are difficult and emotions are high, but we very much hope that a solution can be found which will allow, which will clear this up at least sufficiently before the Bucharest NATO summit. I don't want to go into the details because we're sometimes in the middle of discussions, as is Matt Nimitz, who's the UN Special Envoy on this issue, and he's very active. He's been to the region a number of times lately. These efforts are ongoing, and we obviously wish them full success.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
The gentleman from California, Mr. Costa, recognized for 5 minutes. Is your mic on, Jim?
How about that?
Much better.
Much better. Can my 5 minutes start again?
Yes.
I'd like to focus a little bit about the Serbian government based upon your visit last week and your thoughts as to the impacts, the threats that we hear about. How likely do you think that Kosovo Serbs are going to cooperate with the Austerity Plan? Since it includes provisions, I understand, that includes the Constitution, rights of minorities and justice system and all of that, how effectively can that be implemented with Serbian participation?
Right now, it is difficult for many of the Serbs in Kosovo, even Serbs who want to openly work with the Kosovar government and with the European Union. They feel that many of them feel themselves under pressure and sometimes even threat from radical elements and from elements within the Serbian government, which is very unfortunate. The irony, of course, and you suggested it in your question, is that the Ahtisaari Plan provides extensive protections for the Serbian community, and these
Right.
protections can be better realized if they're cooperating.
Do you think this is a time circumstance? I mean, that you just need enough time to pass for the pressure to wane and for these folks to take advantage of the plan?
That may be the case, and I hope it is. When I was in Kosovo, I heard that many Serbian community leaders are privately expressing a wish to cooperate, and it may be that with time it will be more possible for them to do so.
Based upon the demonstrations that took place, and I guess there were damages, I don't know if we're intending to try to get compensation for them, but do you think Serbia is going to escalate its response based upon what you heard last week? Things like cutting off electricity. I've heard communications links with Kosovo had earlier been rumored.
I didn't visit Belgrade last week, but the Serbian Foreign Minister, Vuk Jeremic, spoke at the UN yesterday, and he suggested that Serbia would not impose an embargo on Kosovo. I do not believe, well, I can't predict the future, but I don't have any reason to believe the Serbs will engage in the most kinds of provocative behaviors. That said, Serbia is going into an election cycle.
When is that?
They're going to have parliamentary elections, I believe, on May 11th. This was just announced earlier this week. So we have to be cautious in predicting the future.
No,
It may be that this election is run, the election campaign is about Serbia's future with Europe, and it may be that Serbs will choose a European future rather than a future of self-isolation.
Well, with that comment in mind, we have the Russian calculation to consider, I guess. And is it your sense that the Russian government now, with the change, although some suspect it's not that much of a change, will respond to Serbia's reaction? I mean, are they going to take the lead from Serbia, or are they going to invoke their own Russian style of branding on this case, as Putin has already stated?
We hope that Russia will play a constructive role and help Serbia accommodate itself to the reality of Kosovo's independence.
Notwithstanding their statements.
But I don't believe it is likely in the short term that they will do so. They have taken a very strong position on this issue.
Do you think they're going to back up their rhetoric with any actions, as they've done with the Ukraine?
I don't think that Russia is in a position directly to put pressure on Kosovo or sanction it. I think that they will, they have so far been diplomatically active in attempting to thwart compromises that could move the issue in a constructive direction, and I regret that.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank
Reserve
you,
the balance
Mr.
of my
Costa.
time.
And gentleman from New Jersey, Mr. Smith, is
Thank you very much,
recognized for
Mr.
5
Chairman. I
minutes.
appreciate yielding. And welcome, Secretary Freed. Just a couple of questions. First, the inevitability of Kosovo's independence, I believe, began at Rambouillet. All of us saw that the writing was on the wall, that it was a matter of when and not if, and the how it came to be, it seems to me, is all important. I think our policy, the European policy in the Balkans over the years, especially going back to the early 1990s, has been feckless. It's been inconsistent. I have held dozens of hearings on the Balkans. I've been there many times. I remember meeting with Milosevic, who regrettably caused horrific damage, as we all know, but it seems as if we always seem to get it wrong. The arms embargo, for example, which Steny Hoyer and I and others thought should have been lifted in order to allow sovereign states to defend themselves, was put into place and locked in an obsolescence and a lack of capability on the part of Bosnia and Croatia especially. There's been a cascading series of mistakes made over the years. I remember meeting with the mayor of Dubrovnik who pleaded with us to do something. And we sat idle with our hands in our pockets, UMPR and the appalling genocide in Srebrenica was another example of European and U.S. Understanding of the nature and scope of the problem. And I was there recently in July, and frankly, when several formerly mass-buried individuals were reinterred, it was a moving ceremony beyond words. I mean, it was Holocaust-like, and to see so many people who had died and the pain that is still etched in the faces of those people. So we've made many mistakes, which is my point. I raise this because I'm concerned about Kosovo now in terms of how this was done. Frankly, we were one of the last ones to recognize Bosnia and Croatia when they declared their independence, and now we're first in the queue, or one among the first. I'm concerned, and I've been concerned for 28 years as a member of Congress, first about the Kosovar Albanians and the breaches of their human rights, which occurred systematically, and now the Serbs in Mitrovica and other places where their human rights have been breached. I know Bishop Artemie is no longer, high on the list of State Department people's, who's the good guys these days, but frankly, he has a point when he brings forward one monastery and one church that has been not only desecrated but leveled to the ground, all while international peacekeepers look on. I understand their frustration. So my question, 2 questions. First, how do we ensure that minority rights truly, in a durable way, are not breached the way they have been breached with impunity over these years? Because frankly, I've not gotten a warm and fuzzy over these many years. I've been to all these places, and it seems like we make one miscalculation after another. And secondly, as someone who believes strongly in the sanctity of human life across the board, and who believes that birth is an event that happens to all of us, it's not the beginning of life, I find it appalling that the draft Constitution contains language that would seem to etch into that Constitution that life begins at birth and onward, and that unborn life is persona non grata. To say that sanctity of life begins at birth is a European means of writing constitutions which precludes sanctity of life for unborn children, and I wish you would speak to that and why our government, especially under a Bush administration, would be aiding and abetting could be open season on another set of minorities, and in this case it would be unborn children, boys and girls.
The gentleman from New Jersey, Mr. Series.
Would you want to respond?
I'm sorry.
I'm happy to respond.
I apologize. Of course.
Congressman, I agree entirely that one of the international community's first responsibilities in Kosovo is to see to it that the extensive provisions for protection of Serbian rights that exist now on paper are implemented in practice. That is one of the reasons, in fact, that is the chief reason, that KFOR will remain, that a new international civilian office is being set up now, and that the EU is fielding a rule of law mission. The purpose is to see to it that the rights of the Serbs, as well as other democratic guarantees, are observed in practice. This is going to be a long-term challenge. The new leaders of Kosovo have committed themselves to working with the international community to see that these rights are observed. So far, post-independence, the situation in most of Kosovo is peaceful and stable, but we cannot assume that this will occur automatically. And we take this responsibility very seriously. With respect to the Constitution, we have made clear to the Kosovo authorities the position of this administration on the issue of right to life, and we have not made clear that this is not something that we are imposing or pressing upon them.
With all due respect, the Europeans are.
I can speak, though, for what we have informed the Kosovars, and they are, and I saw to this myself, aware of this issue. There is much work to do in Kosovo, and we cannot walk away from it. And we take this responsibility seriously.
The time of the gentleman has expired. The gentleman from New Jersey, Mr. Series, is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First of all, let me thank you for your patience. We're coming in and out of here for votes. I appreciate the fact that I'm still here. You know, I just have a question. I know that we had a model for Bulgaria and Romania, and they accelerated their political and their economic transformation. Are we applying the same model, or how is Kosovo alike or different than the efforts that these countries had made after 1989?
Right. Kosovo has basically all of the challenges of post-communist countries. Plus, it has the additional challenges that it is newly emerged as a nation. So it's got it's got double challenges, which means that our support for Kosovo is going to have to be intense, and it will have to take place over a number of years. We know something about the challenges and how to overcome the challenges of post-communist democratic transformation. We're a lot smarter than we were in 1989. And we've seen what works, we've seen what doesn't work. We're better at helping countries than we were when we started out. This is going to take time. Kosovo is a very poor country. It suffered 10 years of a very repressive regime, but even more repressive than the communist norm in the last days of the last years of Milosevic. But we have learned a lot from the experiences in Eastern Europe after 1989, and we will apply those lessons as best we can.
Can you give me one of the lessons? One of the
Sure. For example, an economy requires a modernized banking system, normal credit, good money driving out corrupt money. It needs financial regulators. It needs an insurance system. Often we find, quite frankly, that a flat tax works well because in countries like this it helps reduce corruption. We have learned how to help countries set up these systems that work. And if an investment regime is created that drives down corruption and drives corruption out, money starts to come in. I mean, there's much more I could go on, but I'm giving you an example.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Gentleman from Texas, Mr. Poe, is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Secretary. I've been called a lot of things in my life, but I've never been called a diplomat. So I want to try to get to the chase and and have you explain it to me. I'm aware of the situation, aware of the history, understand all of the turmoil, violence, ethnic problems for years in the area. And the United States has taken a position, and I'm not necessarily saying I disagree, but we've taken the position that Kosovo should be an independent state. What authority does the United States operate under? What policy do we operate under when we go throughout the world and say that a group of people may be an independent state from another state? Where do we get that authority? Second question, what is our policy? I know you said we don't set a precedent, but we did set a precedent. Yeah, we set a precedent in Kosovo. What is the policy of the United States in making our determination as the superpower that a group of people in one part of a country may be independent from that country, and other people in the same situation, Taiwan, Tibet, and China, the problems in Russia, they cannot be separate from their country? Explain that to me. Since we are the power, the world power, we make the decisions, and the rest of the world seems to follow.
We approached the problem of Kosovo's final status and its independence with a lot of reluctance because, as your question suggests, it's not a good idea to have a default mode of supporting separatism. That's not a good idea. And as a rule, we do not. Our decision in Kosovo was based on its unique situation. Yugoslavia fell apart. We didn't play a role in that. Yugoslavia fell apart, killed from within.
Excuse me, Mr. Secretary. My question is not why Kosovo. My question is, what is our policy? By what authority do we act? Where do we get the innate authority to say that one people can separate from another? That's the first question. And the second question is broader than Kosovo. It's what is our policy? And now you're telling me our policy is not to encourage independence.
That's true.
This is an exception to the policy?
Yes, it is very much an exceptional case. And this was a decision we took, frankly, with reluctance, but in recognition of reality. You asked about the inherent authority, and my response is the reality on the ground was that Kosovo would never be ruled by Serbia, that it had been administered by the United Nations for 9 years, and that the terms of the Security Council resolution envisioned independence as a possible final status. We made this decision after seeking to go through the Security Council of the United Nations, which frankly would have been preferable. That was our first choice when we were blocked. The United States, with our key European allies, not on our own, with our key European allies, came to the conclusion that it would be deeply destabilizing to try to freeze a situation which was not tenable. And so we made the decision. Kosovo declared its independence, and we recognized it. This is not, as you say, this is not a rule. It is an exception, and it was an exception based on the unique circumstances of Kosovo.
And so in a hypothetical case, if another group of people come to the United States asking that we give them support, our initial answer is going to be no?
Our initial answer will be of great reluctance because Kosovo, in our view, does not constitute a precedent, and we will look with great skepticism at arguments that it does. Yes, sir.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Time of the gentleman has expired. The gentleman from New York, Mr. Engel, is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You know, I'm listening to some of my colleagues who were opposing this, and I'm wondering if they were around in 1776, if they would have opposed the United States breaking away from England. That's the way it kind of sounds to me. Mr. Secretary, I think you're right on the money. This is a unique situation. And again, I want to reiterate what I said in my opening remark. The former Yugoslavia has broken up. It no longer exists. And every other people in the former Yugoslavia were given the right of self-determination, and the people of Kosovo deserve nothing less. There is no way, after the genocide conducted against the Albanian majority in Kosovo by Milosevic, the Serbian leader, that Pristina and Kosovo could ever be governed again by Serbia. And frankly, I think that the ball is in Serbia's court. Will they keep looking backwards to alliances with Russia and fight wars of 1389 or 1999, or will they look forward and be part of the European Union and be part of the 21st century? I hope that they will. I hope that leaders like Tadic rise to the top. But you just never know. And for people who talk about monasteries, I know the leadership of the people of Kosovo. They are protecting the monasteries. They are very concerned about the monasteries. Minority rights must be protected in Kosovo. And frankly, I think the majority needs to protect Serbs and minority rights. It's unfortunate that the Serbian leadership never protected minority rights in their country, but I think that minority rights need to be protected. And I want to say, Mr. Secretary, I think you're right on the money. This is not a precedent, and I don't think the United States needs to apologize for anything. We did this in concert with our European allies as part of the contact group. This is the best possibility of all kinds of alternatives. The other two would be to have a UN protectorate forever. That doesn't work. And the other thing would be having Kosovo governed by Serbia again, and that, of course, can never work. So this is the only situation out of many alternatives. So let me just ask you a couple of questions. Are you satisfied with the number of countries that have recognized Kosovo as an independent state? How many do you think are likely to recognize Kosovo in the future? What countries are expected to recognize them next?
Congressman, we are satisfied with the number of European countries who have recognized Kosovo, or both recognized and expressed their intention to recognize soon. We have 2/3 of the European Union members, which is pretty good for such a short period of time. We think that recognitions outside of Europe will come in. They are slower, and that's natural because Kosovo is in Europe. It's been a European problem. Europe's been seized with it. We are encouraging governments outside of Europe to recognize Kosovo. Some have, others will, and we think a steady addition of new recognitions will occur over the next months, and we're satisfied that critical mass has already been reached.
Thank you. Will U.S. troops remain in Kosovo as part of KFOR, and how many and how long? I believe that the presence of U.S. troops in KFOR is critical.
The answer is yes, we will remain as long as the mission, we regard our presence as essential to the mission. We have about 1,500 troops. That's about 10% of the total of KFOR troops. So it's 90% non-U.S., but our troops are very effective, and they're very good on the ground. And by the way, they reach out to the Serbian community. I've seen them do it out in the villages in the south. They know what they're doing. They're good at it. And as a citizen, I'm proud to see them doing the right thing.
Thank you. Do you think that Serbia wants a European future? Will this be the main issue in the upcoming Serb election in May? Or is this a vote about rejecting a European future in favor of still fighting to hold on to Kosovo, still clinging to Russia, the past or the future for Serbia?
That may be exactly how the election is fought. Serbia lost Kosovo in 1999. And the question for Serbia is not whether it gets Kosovo back, because frankly, that's gone. The question is whether Serbia realizes its European future, which it deserves. And the only roadblocks in front of Serbia will be those that the Serbs place there themselves. We will support Serbia on the way to Europe. And frankly, the way for Kosovo and Serbia to be part of the same political family again is when both of them are in the European Union.
Thank you. I couldn't agree with you more. And again, thank you for your good work.
The time of the gentleman has expired. The gentleman from Florida, Mr. Bilirakis.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate it.
Recognized for
Mr.
5
Secretary,
minutes.
I know you briefly addressed this while I was voting, the firearm issue. I'd like to make a couple of points if I can. Greece cannot agree to an accession that is wholly contrary to the principles of NATO. According to the Membership Action Plan NATO adopted in 1999, potential members must first display a willingness to settle international, ethnic, or external territorial disputes by a peaceful means, commitment to the rule of law and human rights, and a democratic control of armed forces. Clearly, the firearm has failed to meet even the first criterion. The addition of firearm to NATO would undoubtedly enhance the alliance, but only if it displays an adherence to the rule of law. How could NATO condone firearms' inability to honor international and bilateral agreements with its failure to resolve the name issue in accordance with adherence to the U.S. policy and a UN brokered agreement that calls for ending negative propaganda against Greece by the firearm and settling the name issue? Wouldn't you agree that that's the wrong way to start off a relationship based on mutual security and stability? In my opinion, it would serve the interests of peace, justice, and stability in the region by not allowing firearms accession into NATO until a mutually agreed upon UN-sanctioned name has been determined. And I want to know do you agree with that? What's your position on that? And if not, why not? Thank you.
The United States has supported Macedonia's efforts to join the transatlantic community. We have supported their reforms. We also strongly support the ongoing efforts to reach a mutually satisfactory solution to the name issue. And Congressman, I don't know whether you were here when I mentioned that I was in Skopje Friday night.
No, it was not.
I visited Skopje, and my message to the leadership was, we want to support you, and we hope that you will work with us and with Greece and with the UN negotiator, Matt Nimitz, to find a solution to the name issue. I also told them the United States would do what it could to help. I encouraged them to work with Greece. And of course, I've been in touch with our Greek friends and allies on this issue. Efforts are ongoing, and we hope that this has worked out satisfactorily. It's in everyone's interests for this to be resolved, and to be resolved before the NATO summit. So we are very much, the State Department, I personally, and others are very much involved in this effort.
Are you encouraged?
I'm hopeful that a way forward can be found with goodwill on both sides. Macedonia is a new country. It is a vulnerable one. It escaped, unlike the other countries emerging from Yugoslavia, it avoided civil war. It's got a multi-ethnic government, multi-ethnic coalition, multi-ethnic opposition too. And we hope both sides can find a way forward together.
Thank you.
The committee invited our colleague Melissa Bean to join the committee for this hearing, and I now recognize her for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Ranking Member Russ Lettinen, for holding this hearing and for allowing me to join you today. Secretary Freed, we've spoken in the past. It's an honor to have an opportunity to talk to you here in committee about the status of Kosovo. One comment I'll just make briefly, that you made a statement just a second ago that Serbia lost Kosovo in 1999. I'd just like to point out that that's a different position that the State Department had in 1999 when they said Kosovo would remain part of sovereign Serbia. I understand that's an evolving position of the State Department, and that's now your position, but that's not what it was at the time. I'm encouraged by your written testimony to talk about Bosnia and Herzegovina for a second, regarding, you're essentially saying that reforms can upgrade but should not supplant Dayton. Is that an official position of the administration, and are actions being taken by the State Department to discourage those in Bosnia who are calling for the abolition of the Republic of Srpska?
Yes and yes. It is an official position, and I personally have discouraged strongly efforts to abolish Republika Srpska.
Okay, that's good. The other question I have, to go back to Serbia and their parliamentary elections, as Congressman Engel asked you about, as you know, prior to recognition on the part of the U.S. of a unilateral declaration, some of us who had returned recently from the area had suggested to the State Department that instability could follow such recognition. Certainly, there has been recent fallout within Serbia's government, and Koštunica is dissolving the parliament as these parliamentary elections are coming up. How concerned is the State Department about the trend towards a more nationalistic government of the future and what that does for the region?
The administration is, of course, concerned that nationalist forces seem intent on using this issue to stage a comeback. We believe that Serbia deserves a place, a European future for itself and its people. We support this. We support Serbia's future in Europe, and we will continue to do so. Our ability to help them will depend on whether they choose this future for themselves, and it will be up to the people of Serbia.
Thank you. I guess my last area of questioning has to do with Kosovo specifically. You know, the delegation that I led in 2007 to Kosovo, while we were there, we visited Srpska Babuš, which was an area that was touted as a success of the provisional government in Kosovo, allowing returning Serbs to their communities that had been destroyed. When we were there, it was obvious to all in the delegation. In fact, Congressman Shabbat was with me there, and I think it was his words that described it essentially as a Potemkin village, because it was clear that those people were not living there and that this was a sham success story. In your recent testimony, you've talked about successes in Kosovo over the last 9 years, and that there's been some recent swift actions to respect Serb rights in terms of property rights, religious rights, and their ability to return. Are those the kind of successes we're talking about, or can you give us something more tangible?
First, I'm happy to report to you that so far, at least, the Serbian communities in Kosovo south of the Ibar have not experienced the sort of problems that many feared they would. So that's one piece of good news. With respect to returnees, specific numbers, rebuilding of homes, rebuilding of churches, I would be glad to provide that information to you quite specifically so you can have it. There have been a number of returnees. There have been a number of reconstructions. There have been problems and continue to be problems. Now, many of the Serbian ethnic Serb authorities in Kosovo are refusing to work with the Kosovo government and with the international community generally. But we are committed to see to it that the Serbian community in Kosovo is protected and that it prospers. And you may not have been here, but when I was in Kosovo, I met with Serbian community leaders, including the two government ministers, who made it clear in the Kosovo government now, who made it clear that they want their community to remain in Kosovo and prosper. And they are very interested in developmental assistance, and we are going to help them.
Have you visited areas where returning Serbs, not those who've been there forever, but those who've had to return to areas that were destroyed, are feeling safe yourself? Or are we relying on the same kind of, villages that we were told that were successes in the past?
I have visited Serbian communities both south and north of the Ibar. I've visited Serbian cultural sites like the Dečani Monastery. Our mission in Pristina is in regular contact with the Serbian community. So yes, Our diplomats are in constant touch with the Serb community all the time.
All right, well, I'm encouraged by your visits and your testimony. I'm just hoping that we're sensitive in how we communicate with those Serbs who are understandably concerned about their future, many of whom had K4 protection in the past, and at that time, when the monasteries were destroyed, many lives were taken at the same time. So, you know, they have a lesser confidence maybe than some in their safety and their future there. So I appreciate your commitment to staying on top of that.
The
Thank
time
you.
of the gentlelady has expired. The gentleman from California, Mr. Rohrbacher, is recognized
Thank you.
for 5 minutes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. First and foremost, I'd like to congratulate Secretary Freed for this great work that he's done on this very difficult issue. At the end of his life, he'll look back, and I know he will see this as one of the great accomplishments of his career, and you deserve great congratulations for the job well done. Over the years, I'd like to mention that Tom Lantos, the chairman of this committee, played such a significant role in bringing about this, what I consider to be a very positive historic move. Elliot Engel, Steny Henyer, and myself have been very active in this issue for a decade. And so thank you for your good work, and we're proud to have worked with you. It is, of course, now up to the Kosovars, and if the Kosovars, the success of this new country will be determined by and large, and I think you agree with this, Mr. Freed, that if the Kosovars are able to protect the rights and respect the rights of their Serbian minority, Kosovo will be a success. But that depends on them. If the Kosovars instead are drawn back into revenge and some kind of hateful remembrance of the past, and there were many sins that were committed on both sides, but many sins committed by Serbians against Kosovars in the past. If those sins are not forgiven and people don't move on and there's some attempt at revenge, Kosovo will not succeed as a nation. So it's hard to convince people of things like this, but I hope that we remain a presence and a force for moving forward instead of looking back. And I'm sure, knowing you, Secretary Freed, that that's exactly what we will be doing. One of the lies I would suggest that is being spread now to try to cast doubt on whether or not Kosovo will be able to succeed because of a commitment to freedom is that there have been attacks on Christian churches. And it seems that the Serbian propagandists are continually labeling the Kosovars as radical Islamicists who are anti-Christian, when is it not in fact true that the Catholic Church, we had a leader of Catholic Church from Kosovo right here telling us Roman Catholics don't have any problem, and that instead the attacks on churches have been basically ethnic and not religious related in the past. And that is to say, not to say that we are not totally committed to no attacks on anybody's mosque or anybody's church, whether it be a Roman Catholic or an Orthodox Catholic.
You're correct that, well, attacks on churches and attacks, whether based on religious or ethnic hatred, are all equally unacceptable and must be prevented, and we have a commitment to do so. In fact, the attacks have been ethnic-based,
Right.
not religious-based, and Kosovo is a particularly inhospitable climate for radical jihadists to flourish. The Kosovo population is pro-American, pro-Western, rather secular in outlook, and they look to Europe as their future and to the United States as their friend.
And is this not, Kosovo can be an example to the Muslim world that democracy in the West and Islam can actually work together in harmony rather than being at each other's throats. Is that not the case?
There are several such examples. This is one of them. Yes, sir.
One
Or it
last
can
note.
be one of them.
Okay, one last note, and that is, I'd like to read something to you, and where maybe a little disagreement that we've had, and that is, I'd like to read to you and to answer an earlier question. When in the course of human events it becomes necessary for one people to dissolve the political bands which have connected them with another, and to assume among the powers of the earth the separate and equal station to which the laws of nature and nature's God entitled them, a decent respect for the opinions of mankind requires that they should declare the causes that impel them. Well, of course, that is from the Declaration of Independence. Let me note, I happen to believe that people have a right to self-determination. I'm sorry that our State Department, our government, finds it difficult to try to base support for the people of Kosovo and others on this notion that people have a right to self-determination. I do believe that we have expressed a double standard. You know, whether we're dealing with the Russians or dealing with others who may have understood, if we did indeed just say people have a right through the ballot box to determine whether they want to be part of another country or not. And people say, would you accept then if San Diego decided to vote to be part of Mexico? And I'd say, if the majority of people in San Diego vote to be part of Mexico, it's adios San Diego. But the fact is that this in the long term will create more stability for the world rather than trying to create a situation where large numbers of people in various parts of the world are feeling repressed and compelled to be part of a country that they don't want to be part of. So the Kosovars do have a right to be independent by our basic principles. I don't think we should have a double standard. I think we should understand that, and we should support people's right through the ballot box. I think it would be a more peaceful world if we did that.
The time of the gentleman has expired. There's, and I will refrain from giving quotes from anything that Abe Lincoln ever said on this subject, but the gentleman from Ohio, Mr. Shabbat, and it is 12:30, and we do have a need to get out of here pretty soon, so
Thank you.
hopefully our remaining questions can keep that in mind.
Thank you. Many of my concerns have already been expressed by others in the committee, so I won't just repeat them. I would note that I generally find myself much more closely in tune with a gentleman from California, Mr. Rohrabacher, than I do with the Russians typically in this committee. This is one instance when I find there are, I think, good arguments to be made both sides, but let me tell you what some of my concerns are, and that's the UN Security Council Resolution 1244 obviously is inconsistent with the unilateral decision to break away, which has been supported by our government, by the U.S. and many of the Europeans as well. And the concern being, obviously, that there are other similar situations around the world where groups would like to separate from countries where they find themselves a part of those countries, and does this set a precedent? And is this going to stir up more trouble around the world in other areas? That obviously has to be a chief concern. Would you like to comment on that, Mr. Freed, before I go on any further?
I'll answer both questions. First, we do not believe that Security Council Resolution 1244 precluded independence. We looked at this, so did the Europeans, and we concluded legally that 1244 did not preclude independence, that it outlined a process for the temporary administration of Kosovo and opened the way to a process to determine final status. It would have been preferable, as I said earlier, to have a new Security Council resolution, but when it became clear that Russia would block it, we felt we had to act, and we and our main European allies did so. With respect to precedent, well, there is the Declaration of Independence, and there are various things that President Lincoln said. I won't go into that historical argument, but we do not regard Kosovo's independence as precedent. We believe that the circumstances in Kosovo were unique, and that the solution in Kosovo is not mechanically applicable, no matter what other claims may be. We can assert that, other people may assert other things, but given the choices we had, staying where we were in Kosovo was impossible, going back was impossible, we had to go forward. We recognize the risks, we are prepared to remain committed to mitigate those risks, and our initial experience with the independent Kosovar government suggests that they understand their own responsibilities to do the right thing now and in the future.
Is there concern that, for example, say Republic of Srpska would be, there could be danger of a similar situation there vis-a-vis Bosnia-Herzegovina?
There are two dangers we see in Bosnia. One is that Republika Srpska would seek to break the basic Dayton formula by attempting secession. We would resolutely oppose that, and we have told the leaders of Republika Srpska so. The other danger is that from the other side, some would seek to abolish Republika Srpska altogether. Our message to the Serbian leadership and all the leadership of Republika Srpska is that we hope to see Bosnia, both the Bosniak-Croat Federation and Republika Srpska, all moving forward to Europe all together, with the Dayton form improved upon and made more functional, but intact. And that we will not support and we will resolutely oppose, in fact, either extreme. And that's been our consistent message, and it will continue to be.
Okay, and I would just, do I have any time left, Mr. Chairman, or are we about out of it? I have one additional minute just to make a point. Thank you. All right, thank you. One of the other concerns, obviously, is the protection of minority religious rights, including protection of churches, monasteries, synagogues, whatever they might be, mosques, anywhere in the world where there's attacks on those types of facilities is just unacceptable. And I saw, many photographs of churches which had been destroyed or terribly damaged. And it's absolutely, I think, the responsibility of the world to make sure those types of things don't happen. And I certainly hope that this committee and others will monitor to make sure that that people are protected, given the circumstances now, which I find very disturbing the way this all came about. I yield back the balance of my time.
Has expired, and I recognize the gentleman from South Carolina, Mr. Inglis, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And Mr. Assistant Secretary, it's sort of an interesting question to follow up on Dana Rohrbacher's questions about stability. And you may have been discussing this earlier, are we really watching sort of the disintegration of the nation-state concept? I mean, and maybe you've already answered this or tried to enunciate principles, and I don't want to sound critical in the question. It's just I'm wondering, how far do we support disintegration if that's where we're headed? And is it more stable, or is a nation-state where people resolve their differences within the conflicts between ethnic groups within a nation-state more stable than having separate ethnically identified groups with borders that become hot wars? I mean, which is more stable in your view?
You've asked profound questions, and if I attempted to give you a simple mechanistic answer, I'd get it way wrong. There are principles of self-determination, but if that principle is pushed to an extreme without common sense, you risk disintegration. There are principles, and good principles, that nations that are multi-ethnic and allow for the rights of many peoples are apt to be more stable. The situation in Kosovo resulted from the breakup of a multinational state which was murdered from within by nationalism. We could no more have kept Kosovo bound to Serbia after the experience of the Yugoslav civil wars than we could recreate Austria-Hungary or the Ottoman Empire. It was gone. It was over. And we had to deal with that fact. As a general rule, and I want to be responsive to the question because it's a serious one, we tend not to support separatist claims. We tend to support efforts by countries to work out ethnic differences in accordance with the rule of law, human rights, and respect for national minorities. That is why the breakup of Yugoslavia was hard for many of us, and why Kosovo independence was not an easy call to make. But it was, in our judgment, the right and the only call to make. But it is not a precedent that should be mechanically applied. I could go on.
Yeah.
This is a deep question, but I've tried to give you the outlines of an answer.
Well, I think it's a good answer, and because I don't think we'll in 5 minutes here to find an answer that would cover every situation. It is of concern when you consider the moves in some parts of London, for example, to declare Sharia law applicable in various sections of London. It seems that there we would oppose self-determination and say, you need to live within the British system, and you can't have a separate state operating within that state, especially one so different. I'm sure that, but that's an extreme example of what we're talking about here. I assume it would be your response to that.
Of course, we support the position that the rule of law should apply to the citizens and the residents of the state in which they live.
Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.
I thank the gentleman. Because of the time, I'm going to refrain from getting into the one issue. I was hoping to have a chance to piggyback the question of Ukraine, Georgia, and NATO into my questions here, but I think this is something that's worthy of a little more attention than at the last second. So if it is all right with the ranking member, I will thank you, Assistant Secretary, for your testimony and all your great work, and adjourn the hearing.
Plus, we ended with profound questions from Bob.